Okay, welcome to a message to Lightworkers, an interview series created to share and connect through our healing work and our life path. Today we have Gary Ramsey, who is currently a teacher of voice, speech, breathing coordination, and the Alexander Technique. He is the head of the voice and speech department at the Neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater in New York City and maintains a private teaching practice. He has also worked as an opera singer in the US and abroad. His busy schedule was interrupted when he was diagnosed with a deadly cancer situation that could cause him to die any minute. He was able to follow his intuition and guidance due to the insight and knowledge he had gained throughout his career. And during this amazing journey, he discovered a deep and profound feeling of bliss that urged him to love and accept his predicament unconditionally. This gave him many new insights beyond his illness and potential death. He now lives a peaceful and blissful life without any fear of the unknown future that awaits all of us. Gary, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Bri. It's so lovely to be here.
Gary, I read a piece of your book,
Oh,
Bliss,
thank you.
One Hero's Journey. And when I went to Amazon, there was almost like 100 reviews, and you got literally all 5 stars, nothing below 5. So I'm like, okay, this must be a really good book.
And I'm so grateful. I mean, people have just really loved the book, and I wrote it just for people to inspire them who are facing really, really bleak and dreadful circumstances.
Yeah. Tell us about your story. What moment was that for you? Did you go through that bleak moment before, like you kind of found this bliss? What was your story?
Yeah. I had been dealing with a health issue that had been going on and off for maybe like a couple of months at that time, and I didn't really understand it. And like a lot of things with cancers, you can put them off as upset stomach, not feeling well, then you run a fever, it's gone. It's that kind of thing. And finally, something did happen, and I went to a specialist. And I knew at that point something was wrong, but I wasn't really expecting anything horrible, maybe some kind of surgery, et cetera, et cetera. And I walked into the doctor's office that day. I knew something was up because once he looked at all the final results, he was looking at them, and he had my scan up on his machine and everything. And he turned and he kind of looked at me, and he turned back and looked at what it was, and he ran out of the office. And I thought, that's odd. Like, what's that about? And he was gone, but he was talking then to somebody in his reception. And then he came in and he closed the door. He looked back at everything, and he looked at me, and he said, I have to tell you, you can die at any minute. And I was in shock. I didn't understand it at first. I thought he was maybe joking. I thought, like, what? Like, maybe I didn't hear him right, or there was some kind of, he was playing around. And then he said it again. He said, you can die at any minute. And I couldn't believe it. I said, how can you say that? And then he went on to explain this very macabre thing, which was really about the cancer was not as deadly as the tumor. I had a very deadly and dangerously placed tumor that had gone through my kidney, through the renal vein, and up towards my heart. And he said, these are nearly impossible to remove. He said, they can fracture or break at any time. They will stop your heart, and you may not be alive in the next hour. He said, I really have to tell you, you are in a grave situation. And if I were you, I would immediately get your affairs in order as quickly as possible before you do anything. And I have to tell you, Bri, that was, it was almost like being in a twilight zone. I remember I kept thinking, I didn't know whether to laugh or to jump out a window. I mean, it was like that macabre. I thought, oh my God. And then I said to him, I said, well, can't I do anything? And he said, well, that's the bad news. No, you really can't. I'm pretty sure if you go to the hospital, if they do a surgery, they'll kill you. If they try a radiation, they're going to kill you. He said, I don't think there's really anything that can be done. And that was like, oh my God. So I was kind of just going through the motion, and I think I was still in shock, but I was very present. I was very aware of everything. And then I looked at him and I said, well, can I have those results? Now, I don't know why I wanted them, because he had already told me only one hospital in New York could even handle my operation, which was Sloan Kettering. And he just looked at me like, well, yeah. And it was later in the day. And I said, I think I need them. And he was like, okay. And then all of a sudden his person was there with all my reports. It was almost like they were all afraid I was going to die in the office. He wrote down some things. He wrote down his personal number. He said, please call me at any moment if you need anything. But you've got to get the word out to your people. And anybody, he said, just have them contact my office and they will know everything. I said, okay. So I walked out of his office, and it was a absolutely beautiful day. And I like breathed. Like I could feel my breath come into my body in one of the deepest ways I've ever felt. And I felt light. And I felt as though a weight had been taken off of me. And I remember feeling so strange about that. And I thought, wow, this is really serious. And I walked down the block. There was a little park with, children, nannies, parents, etc., with these kids. And everybody was just doing all kinds of stuff. It was a gorgeous day. And all of a sudden, I had the realization, oh my God, anybody here that I'm seeing right now could die at any minute. But I have proof and they don't. And any child could run out into the street, they could have an accident, somebody could have a heart attack, but I am walking around with a death sentence. But we all are. And man, that boo, like I blew open. It was almost like when people talk about an enlightenment or a kundalini, although I won't call it that, but there was this complete charge that went through my body. And so much so that I needed to sit down. And I sat down in this park, and I don't even know how long I sat there. I really don't. And I all of a sudden was stirred by a woman that you are familiar with, Anita Morjani. And for those of you that don't know Anita, she was a woman who was dying of cancer in the cancer hospital. She was on her deathbed. She only had about 40 minutes left to live. That's what the family was told. And miraculously, in her story, she went through a near-death experience. She realized she could heal the cancer, came out of the coma, and her cancer disappeared within 8 days in a major cancer hospital in Hong Kong. And I thought about her and I thought, that happened to her. Maybe something will happen with me. And I remembered even thinking, I'm not in a coma. I'm not on my deathbed yet. The doctor even said when it happens, it'll happen quickly. It'll only take 8 to 10 minutes to stop your heart. And I thought, this is actually really great. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's the first moment where I let go that I would either die or not die. I just let go of everything. And it was like, I'll just be with this. And then the thought came to me, so then now what do I do? And I literally had no idea. And I remembered he said, you have to tell people. So I called my sister. And that's when it began. That's when it began becoming real, telling people outside of my story. And that's where then things started to shift. She asked me at the end of the call, what are you going to do? And I literally said, I don't know. Then I was going to be in an opera that later on in the early fall, I had to call them and cancel. That was another very difficult call. And then as I got to my house, I put my key in my door and I thought of Farrah Fawcett just out of nowhere. And the reason was because Farrah Fawcett had been flown to Germany shortly before she died. And I remember thinking, wow, why did they do that? And a friend had told me Germany had the top cancer treatments in the world. So I thought maybe I could research Germany. Maybe Germany's got something that we don't know about in the States. Flew up on the computer. And again, this all happened exactly in this order. And then I got on the computer, I'm researching Germany, and this beautiful thing pops up that looked like a white palace. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, that's gorgeous. Now that would be a place, if I'm going to die, that would be the place to die in. Because it was on the Baja, it was in Mexico. And sure enough, as I popped on it, it was a cancer. They did cancer and they handled difficult cancers. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how is this happening? So I get on there and I'm reading and they're going on about, they have cutting edge treatments. They don't handle like the States and they have a number to call. So I call. A lovely woman gets on. Her name was Michael. And I said, I'm in a real problem. And so I explained it to her and she said, well, sir, we do deal with very deadly tumors. I said, but they're saying these are inoperable. These are deadly. I have no options. She said, yes, they do say that in the States, but we do have different therapies that we try. Now, we can't guarantee you're going to survive, but we will guarantee you that you have a much better chance of surviving here. And I did find out my chance went almost up to 30%. I went from like a 1 or 2% to 30. And I thought, well, what a beautiful place to go to. I mean, why do I want to be in Sloan Kettering? I had friends die in Sloan. I thought, why don't I go to Mexico? Why don't I do something really unusual? Why don't I do an event? So we were discussing and I said, I think this is something I need to apply for. And she said, well, the only problem is we really need your medical records. And I had them. Now, that was the first moment, Bri, I knew God is working on this. Like, I knew because there was no reason for me to ask for those test results. There was no reason. There was nothing to do with them. And I had them and she said, oh my God, that's so great that you had the presence of mind to ask for those results. And she said, because this is going to save us a lot of time. And I said, good, because I don't have any. They said any minute. And we started laughing about that. And she said, sir, I got to tell you, you have one of the greatest outlooks I've ever witnessed about something this serious. And I said, I had an experience in the park. And from that moment on, I never felt maudlin. I never felt as though I knew that death was possible, but there was no attachment to it. And even sometimes when I would go to sleep, I think, well, I might not wake up. I might not wake up. And from that moment in the realization of the park, I just had no more attachment. It was like I was living outside of my life. And people talk about a fifth dimensional reality where I was no longer stuck to this body or this person. And it was like I was going to help it. I was going to do the best that I could, but I was no longer attached. And from one event to the next, and this was really my biggest message that I talk about in the book, when you let go, when you no longer live in fear, in worry, in that constant idea of the guillotine coming down on your head, miracles are present at every second. And I went through miracle after miracle. Just when something bleak would happen, this miraculous thing would come in. And I'm talking about um, somebody that I would just meet that would help me with my ticket for Mexico. I mean, it was just these unbelievable, it went from the little and the mundane to the huge, to the actual life and death situation.
Mhm.
And that's why I called the book Bliss, because it began with bliss, because I really call that state I was in the park a state of bliss, one hero's journey, that we are heroes on our journey, making our way through. And the only thing that really blocks us, the only thing that really stops us is our fear. Our fear will take us and really then put us in this third dimensional reality, and we become almost a prisoner to our, whatever, the doctors, the diagnoses, the people around us, that we literally then are stuck in our box. And I luckily went out of my box. I totally went out of my box.
I love this story. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to make a connection because there was this woman that I spoke to once,
Okay.
and she was like, I want you to explain the difference between the detachment, like the way that she was, and like how you experienced it. Because she mentioned to me that she was in a lower, like, kind of place in her life. And she said, Bri got to the point where like I just didn't care if I lived anymore. And again, she had no attachment to like if she lived or didn't live. So it almost felt like my life is so bad. I don't kind of like suicidal. Like my life is so bad and it was just so bleak, like you said, and just dark. What's the point of living if I could just come back, or if I'm just this spirit, or I'm just this
Mhm.
thing that's not really attached to this physical body? Like, what's the point? What's the difference that you experience versus that, or is it the same?
It's really, in a sense, very similar, but she got there by the negativity, the overwhelm of the negativity. And for some reason, I got there. Once I got out of the doctor's office, there was a clear something already had shifted. And then once I hit that park and made that realization, I just, boom, I just blissed out. I just went into that state. So I think my life had been very positive. I did not have a bad life. I did not have bad things going on. I did want to live. I had an opera performance coming up and teaching coming up that I really wanted to do. I was excited about. So I think for me, it was just the letting go of the positive stuff and going, well, this is the new thing that's facing me. And I think for her, it was finally just the negative stuff that got her there. And it's funny, I don't think it matters which side of the coin gets you there. I think what matters is that you get there, because I like to call it being in the paradox. You are neither going one way or the other. You are sitting in the paradox, and you are kind of, in a sense, observing and watching and participating when you need to. But when you participate, again, there's no attachment to it. I didn't need the treatments to work, but yet I loved the treatments. I didn't need anything to happen a certain way, and yet it happened in beautiful ways. And that was the most powerful uh, thing that I've ever witnessed in my life. As a matter of fact, I tell people, almost dying of that deadly cancer was the greatest gift and the greatest blessing I have ever received throughout my entire life. It's almost like I now understand the mystery of it, which I think is, and just to put it more succinctly, is to grow out of those smaller beliefs of fear and worry and evil and all of that stuff, and to realize that once you get out of there, everything transforms. Everything transforms. And I think that's really the key secret to life. And I will be honest, since I've written the book, And I've had a lot of people. I mean, now I've had a lot of people very ill. Some who have passed, some who are still living and shouldn't be living. And I have heard miracle story after miracle story after miracle story. But I will tell you, the ones that do pass are the ones that just can't get past the deadliness of the situation, the fear of the situation. And so I've really learned how to just navigate that. And I'm also very good at, I don't keep, telling people, you've got to be stronger, you've got to be this, you've got to be that. I keep telling them to really feel what you feel and to really accept and to see if you can start to see it from a different perspective. And I encourage them, I would say. I encourage them. I never really give advice, but I ask questions and I encourage, and I answer whatever questions they have. I answer whatever, and then I, share my story with people.
For some reason, this was really bringing up the book, Louise Hay's book, like I Can Heal
Oh,
My Life,
yes, yes,
the whole
Louise.
affirmation and like changing the mindset. Do you agree with her with like the reason why people get cancer, which is like just emotion or anger or frustration kind of stored in the body? Or do you think you experienced something else? Because you said you really didn't have that much of a super negative experience of life.
Right. What I did realize though on my journey, so for me, I would say yes. I realized slowly why my cancer got there. And for me, I was the person who didn't want to disappoint anybody and who would burn that candle at both ends so as not to disappoint anybody. Whether it was in opera, my work, my teaching, my students, didn't matter. And that's what did it. And I will say that's a pretty common theme with a lot of people who are having really busy lives. We see it all the time. That everything's going great. They're on the top of the world, but then all of a sudden something horrible befalls. So I do agree with Louise Hay, who's kind of like the grandmother of all this. I mean, she's been around forever, but I don't really push that belief onto other people. I would never say to somebody who's ill or with cancer that you caused this or this is because of what you've done. I would never do that. I believe a person has to come to their own conclusions. And I encourage people to create relationships with their diseases because it's part of us. That I do say to people, the cancer was a part of me. It grew inside of me and I my body allowed it to grow. Just like if a woman gets pregnant and has a baby, it's it's been allowed to happen. And now you have to have a relationship with it. You have to come to some kind of terms because it's an energy inside of you that is continuing to grow, and it will continue and continue like a baby. It will not stop, but a baby will be born and the disease might not be born. It might be eradicated from the body, but it might not be. So I like people to always have a relationship with it, and I encourage them to find the good of the relationship and the bad, like in any relationship. What are the positive aspects of it and what are the negative aspects of it, so that it's much easier to be involved in a relationship where there is compassion. A lot of people hate their cancer. A lot of people fight their cancer. I know it works for some people, and I tell them if that's really working for you, you do that. It was not the way that I could go. I could not fight it. I didn't have that kind of strength. I literally didn't. Um, as the days progressed, I lost more and more weight. I got weaker and sicker. I mean, there was not a lot of fight. So I surrendered to, we can call it a love. We can call it a blissful love. I surrendered to that, and everything around me became magical. And I knew whether I lived or died, I was going to do it beautifully. I knew that every moment that I had left was going to be beautiful, and I was going to be participating in it in a beautiful way with no fear, no worry, and no anxiety. And my only real problem were other people because everybody else would get crazy. Um, and to be honest, that was the great thing about finally getting to Mexico, because then I was isolated and I finally could get away from the friends and the family and the calls and the computers. I could get away from it. And that is the other thing I learned, that people who are very, very ill get pressured often. Not only do they get pressured from the medical side, but they get pressured from their spouse sides, their children, their friends, their relatives. And what is interesting, the deadlier, and I found this now with other cancer people, the deadlier the situation, the more pressure they get, because the options are fewer. And people around us who love us, they have an agenda about what they feel we should do, because that's what they think is the best thing. And to be honest, they put a tremendous strain and a tremendous amount of negative energy on the sick person who doesn't have that much energy, who doesn't really have that much strength. And I am finding that is the dark side of cancer that nobody talks about, that loved ones can actually become a detriment to the healing. They can actually become a detriment, both them outside of them, and also some people, and I've known this, especially the people with children, they get drained because they still try to be there for the children in the way that they want to be. So they're zapping their own energy and over giving to these outside people, even though it's not being demanded. But there are outside people that do demand, especially the adults, not the children, the adults. And I find that that's a really deadly situation. That's a really deadly situation that very few people discuss. I mean, if I were to write another book, it would really be about that.
That's really interesting. I've never considered that as like something that could really take a toll on someone's healing journey in that way, in such a powerful way. So yeah, I think you should write a book now about that. Very good book.
But the truth was, I never wanted to write a book. That was the real truth. I actually, again, that happened because Anita Moorjani was the inspiration that shook me out of my bliss state, got me move. I would say Anita's got me into action, and she always says in her book, she knew whether she lived or died, everything would be well. And I hung on to that, and I believed that everything would be well, whether I lived or died. And when I got back, which it was a period of 6 weeks. I was gone for 6 weeks total, start to finish. And when I got back, within a few months after that, by the summer, Anita, for the first time ever, and again, this is these continued miracles, was doing a workshop in upstate New York. She had never done a small workshop like that. She'd always done them with Wayne Dyer, who, by the way, died when I was in Mexico. And she'd always done these thousands of people thing. And this was her first one that she was going to do with a smaller, more intimate group. And I went. And, I was kind of shy. And she had a tremendous amount of people there, both who were very ill and ill. There were levels of it. People who were, terminal. So it was kind of a fraught situation. And, here I was, this kind of success story like her. So I was kind of keeping a low profile, especially as I learned that there were a lot of people there that were not in very good shape. And then, as the universe does, there was somebody there who knew me from the past. and they had heard about my story on social media. And so they were like, "Oh my God, you got to tell Anita about your story." And I said, "Yeah, but there's so many sick people here, and I feel kind of." And they said, "Oh, but you should, when the opportunity arises, you really should. You should." And then when we were sitting in the last day of the workshop, and Anita brought up about diagnoses and how doctors can often have a very deadly outlook, and their perspective is very grim. And she said that can really take its toll on you. And she said, "But I've never heard of anybody being told that they were going to die right away." She said, "Has that ever happened to anybody?" And I raised my hand. And she was like, "What?" And I said, I was told I could die at any minute." She said, "You were?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I really, that's shocking. Why did they say that?" So of course, then I had to explain, the tumor, the situation. Well, pretty soon her husband comes over and gives me a mic. And then pretty soon we're discussing back and forth. The whole workshop now has kind of shifted. And what happened right after that is Anita's husband came up to me after it was done, and he said, "Anita would like to speak to you." So I went up there, and she said, "Would you please be on my radio show? I really want you on my radio show." So I went on that show, and from that show, I got a tremendous, tremendous response. It was through Hay House, Louise Hay, and Louise was still alive at the time. And that's really how I got the pressure to write the book. I just got so many people who wanted to know so many different things, and I just couldn't. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of people I just couldn't respond to. So that was really that was the inception of the book. That was
Wow, I love that. In the
Yeah,
beginning, I love that. It's so like that's the universe. If
that's the
there's
universe.
ever like example of how the universe works to kind of perform and do what it is you're supposed to do, right?
Absolutely. Never wanted to write a book in my life. I was never interested. I'm not really that great of a writer. Of course, I had to get an editor, and I had to do all these things that I've never had the impulse to do. You see those, wouldn't you like to write a book? And I was one of those people who always said no, like no. And then I'm writing a book. But I was really happy to do it because I feel it's a service. I feel it was a real service. And now there have been so many people that have been helped by my book or led to Anita's book because of my book. And even though, again, some have miraculously survived and some have not. But there were people that were even really comforted as they were dying by both my book and, of course, Anita's book, which is another wonderful example of not allowing yourself to succumb to that heavy, dark energy of the third dimension. That's what I like to call it. It's just that heavy, dark doom and gloom, kind of like what we have going on right now, where you just look at the news and there is nothing but bleak and dark and deadly. And I'm here to say that no, you can rise right out of that. You do not have to become a part of that. And that is the beauty of our being, and how really multifaceted that we are. And I really do believe, I know this will sound a little crazy, I hope your audience is okay, but sometimes I really do believe I'm no longer living on the third dimension. I feel like I'm living on another dimensional reality. And though I can understand what's going on in this dimension, I can no longer buy into it in the way that I did prior to my cancer, which, by the way, is 5 years ago now. I've been cancer free for over 5 years now. We're going into year 6. So it's that's been a blessed thing to be able to give that kind of strength to other people, or inspire them to looking at what's going on in a different way.
Beautiful. In the beginning of our session, you were talking about how you were sitting on the bench and you were thinking maybe I could have one of those like magical miracle experiences like where Johnny did, where she woke up and it was just all gone.
Right.
You know, did that happen for you? Did you get that moment of miracle of like you wake up and it's just gone?
Well, in terms of internal feeling, yes. In terms of the cancer, no. I had to have surgery. She didn't, but I did. And the surgery was the big moment because the surgery was the thing that in Mexico, they were pretty sure I wouldn't die uh, leading up to the surgery because of the treatments, because of the pre-treatments that they were doing. They were pretty sure the tumor would not stop my heart. They were positive about that. But what they were trying to do was get a good window for the surgery. And what they didn't know is, would the tumor behave during the surgery, or would it fracture? Which often happens during cancer surgeries where it spreads. And even a particle of it coming off would have stopped my heart immediately during that surgery. So that was their problem. So Anita, she woke up to miraculous. and I still had to go through this journey of this very dangerous operation. And what I will say, uh, I had many dreams. I had many occurrences where I was being given messages. And the messages were very helpful. Although at one point I did have a dream where I had a repeated dream. And I was pretty convinced after the second time I had it that I was probably not going to make it. But that was very helpful as well because it prepared me. It prepared me for the surgery. And I thought, I'm going to go into that surgery really well prepared for any outcome. And that made me calmer going into the surgery, which was very, very good. And in Mexico, I did have to have a relative there. So my sister came out because if I did die, they needed a representative for my body. They would not perform it without a representative there. So she was my representative. And I remember when I woke up from that surgery, I really did think I was dead. I really did think I really did pass. And that happened because I was seeing another being in the room that I was pretty sure was my grandmother, who had died many years before. But everything was very confusing. And it was almost like I was in two different realities, like a third and a fifth dimension. I was in two different realities. And then finally, it became clear to me that I was actually still alive. And when I realized I was alive, all of the other stuff disappeared. And that was kind of like almost like my transition back into maybe my body. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they never said that they lost me on the table, nothing like that. As a matter of fact, they were surprised how well the surgery had gone. They were surprised at how beautifully it actually unfolded. But prior to surgery, that wasn't the case. Prior to surgery, especially the night before, we had a lot of problems that night. We had a lot of problems. So mine was a little more, like one of those cliffhangers. And when you read the book, you can tell it was a real cliffhanger. Whereas Anita, she just woke up and knew it was all going to go away, and it did, which I would have loved to have had an experience like that. I would have loved it.
I can appreciate the fact that you could accept it. Like, I think yours is a great story of like accepting what is. Like you of course you would want a miracle, but you accepted what your journey was. And I love that. I love that aspect of your story. I want to kind of go down these last three questions here.
Sure.
When you say you were kind of in that 3D kind of thinking,
Yes.
what was one lie that you lived by? That was kind of in the forefront of your life that when you kind of changed, you kind of realized that's a big lie I was living by. That's a big lie that took a big part of my life, my mental space.
That if I disappoint people, they will not love me. They will not want me in their life. Any disappointment that I give to them, they will cut me out.
Mhm.
Although ironically, what I will tell you, um, when I did go to Mexico, there were a lot of people, and I'm talking a huge amount of people that were very much against it, didn't believe in it, even though they knew my chances were very bad if I stayed here, and threatened me and said, I will never talk to you again. And they did not. They did not. And I'm talking a pretty substantial number of people, because what I learned about that, so I kind of had to face that very fear that I disappointed them and they cut me out. They totally cut me out. But what I learned, and what I've learned through other cancer people as well, when you do go outside of the box, and when you are successful at having gone outside of the box, as I was, many people, that's a button that they will never forgive you for. And a lot of them have already lost people that they would have done anything to try to save. And then you did something that they never thought of. And the resentment is overwhelming. So a lot of people just checked out of my life. And that was ironic, because that was one of the things that, I never wanted to disappoint people. And what did I do? I saved my life and ended up disappointing a multitude of people. I mean, a multitude of people, and that was difficult. The transition back into my life was difficult. I just thank God I had my job and my students were still there, that I was able to at least have some modicum of a life. That was really, really helpful. Really, really helpful.
Awesome. What would you tell a struggling light worker to remember as they're attempting to kind of follow their own guidance, follow their own path?
That we feel, and this is a really good question, and that's why I want to really formulate. We have lived lives all along, where we are taught to mistrust either ourselves or others, or other things or institutions. We're taught a lot about mistrust, and then we're only taught about trust when it's something really big, really, really big. But the little things, oh, don't read that. Oh, don't look at that. Oh, that's silly. Oh, and so people have a real bad radar with discernment in terms of messages that they get, both from the outside world, but also internal messages. And what I have found is a lot of people struggle between those. We're having it right now with the news. Just look at COVID. You can find 20 articles about you should wear masks, and you can find 20 other articles where you should never wear a mask. Okay. And people then get confused. And as you notice, kind of like what's going on, there's like a little war going on with what should be done and shouldn't be done. And I'm following the science and you're not following science, and well, I got bad news for people. There is no definitive anything. There is no definitive answer. There is no definitive science. Even science, look at what it's doing right now today, and look at what it did 2 years ago, and it's already completely different. There is no definitive truth except the one that exists within you. And if you truly, truly want to save either yourself or someone else, or to help in some way, you have to get in touch with that. And if you are being bombarded by all this outside stuff, as I was during my cancer journey, and being told, you know, uh, no options, which I was so pleased I was told no options. That helped. That helped. I think being told I would have had options might have made my journey more complicated. I might not be alive today had I been given options. And that's when I realized it's all up to us internally. We are the ones that heal ourselves. We are the ones that overcome our circumstances. We are the ones. And no one outside of you can do it for you. It's like being born. No baby can have somebody else be born for it. Only that baby is going to be born by itself, with the assistance of, yes, its mother and maybe something else. But remember, the baby is basically doing it with a natural birth. They're having to go through it. And that's really the biggest message I would say. You have to go through it, and you can never allow someone to take down your light. Once they take down your light or they throw you off course, and let me tell you, people with this COVID, they're getting thrown a lot of curveballs, and already a lot of misinformation. And a lot of people have died because of that misinformation. Once you fall to that, and I'd like to kind of classify it as kind of an evil, because they want you to do what they want you to do, you're doomed.
Yeah.
You are doomed. And I don't care what the situation is. You are really doomed. And the saddest cancer victims are children, because children fall victim to their parents. And there's no way around that. There is just no way around that, because the child is clocking off the parent. So that's the sad part. And what a lot of, my parents with children with disease, they don't realize how much their internal is really feeding the situation. And of course, many of them are devastated and hysterical and worried and terrified. But that is actually helping the disease to progress.
Mhm.
And that is a tragedy, total tragedy.
If you could assign one I am affirmation to everyone on the planet, what would that be?
I am all that is and all that will ever be.
I love that. Gary, I want to thank you for visiting us today and sharing your story.
Oh, you are so welcome, Bri. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. And thank you, everybody out there who's listening. I really appreciate it. Spread the word.
To everybody listening that wants to connect with Gary or know more about his story, I'll be leaving the links to his info and ways you can contact him and even read his book. Again, thank you, listeners, for participating. Remember to share this episode if you find that it'll inspire or help someone else. See you next time.